What happens when country music royalty meets morning television controversy? Today we're diving into one of the most explosive moments in recent talk show history, the day Reba McEntire, the undisputed queen of country, reached her breaking point on Today with Jenna and Friends. What began as a cheerful interview meant to promote Reba's latest tour and projects quickly spiraled into a live on-air confrontation that left everyone stunned, and ended with Reba storming off the set in fury. The morning had started like any other at the Today Show studios. Reba arrived ready to talk about her music and upcoming performances, expecting the usual friendly chat. Jenna Bush Hager was hosting that day, joined by her panel of co-hosts for what NBC had billed as a lighthearted entertainment segment. The cameras rolled, the audience settled, and Jenna opened with her trademark smile. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Today with Jenna and Friends. I'm absolutely thrilled to have country music legend Reba McEntire with us this morning. Her tone was warm and upbeat, but Reba, who had done enough interviews to read the room instantly, sensed something slightly off. Thank you for having me, Jenna, she replied politely. It's always a pleasure to be here. Things took a sharp turn when Jenna shifted gears. Now, Reba, before we talk about your tour, she said, adopting a serious tone, there have been some pretty big conversations lately about authenticity in country music. Some critics say that veteran artists, maybe even legends like yourself, have been compromising their roots for mainstream appeal. How do you respond to that? The question hit like a thunderclap. The air in the studio went still. Reba's smile faded, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly as she realized this wasn't going to be the friendly conversation she'd agreed to. I'm sorry, she said coolly, her voice professional but edged with steel. What exactly are you suggesting? Are you implying I've betrayed country music? Jenna, clearly realizing she had stepped into dangerous territory, tried to soften it. Oh, no, not at all, she stammered. I'm just curious how you feel about the evolution of the genre, and whether you felt pressured to adapt to modern trends. Some of your recent collaborations have sounded a bit different. Before Jenna could continue, one of the co-hosts awkwardly laughed and tried to change the subject. Maybe we can talk about the tour dates. Fans are so excited to see you live again. But Reba wasn't about to let it slide. She leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but commanding. Let me get this straight. You invited me here to talk about my new music, and now you're questioning my integrity as an artist? You're suggesting I've sold out? That's not what I said, Jenna replied quickly, her voice rising defensively. I just wanted to have a meaningful conversation about the industry. Meaningful conversation? Reba repeated, her tone now sharp enough to cut glass. Honey, I've been making music since before you were born. I've sold over 56 million albums, won every major award in the business, and stayed true to my roots every single step of the way. So if you're going to question my authenticity, you'd better come with receipts. The room fell silent. Crew members exchanged nervous glances. Producers whispered frantically into their headsets, and even the audience seemed frozen. Jenna tried to recover, her practiced composure beginning to crack. Reba, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I have nothing but respect for your career. Oh, is that what that was? Reba interrupted, her southern drawl growing thicker as her frustration boiled over. Because it sure sounded like you came here armed with gotcha questions designed to stir up controversy. Is this what journalism looks like now? The co-host tried once more to steer the discussion back to neutral ground, suggesting they talk about Reba's new songs. But it was too late. Years of professionalism and patience had reached their limit. Reba took a deep breath, glared at Jenna, and then said with chilling calm, I don't have time for this nonsense. She unhooked her microphone, stood up, and walked off the set as the stunned studio audience gasped. For a moment, no one moved. Jenna sat frozen in her chair, her expression a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. The segment cut abruptly to commercial, leaving viewers across the country buzzing with questions. What was meant to be a simple morning show promo had turned into one of the most unforgettable live TV meltdowns in years, and a stark reminder that even country royalty has her limits. Reba, I think we're getting off on the wrong foot here, Jenna began, her voice trembling slightly as she tried to regain control of the interview. My questions come from a place of genuine curiosity about the industry you've helped shape. Reba let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Genuine curiosity? Honey, I've done thousands of interviews in my career. I know the difference between genuine curiosity and a setup. What I'm curious about is why your producers thought it was a good idea to blindside me with this nonsense when I came here in good faith to talk about my music. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. One of the co-hosts, clearly sensing Jenna was in over her head, tried to step in diplomatically. Reba, we're all huge fans of your work here. I think what Jenna was trying to get at is just the broader conversation about how country music has evolved. Reba turned toward him, her expression softening slightly, though her tone remained firm. I appreciate that, and I'm happy to talk about the evolution of country music. But there's a difference between discussing evolution and questioning someone's integrity. When you suggest that artists like me have compromised our values for mainstream appeal, you're not just talking about music anymore, you're talking about character. Jenna, realizing she was losing control, decided to double down instead of retreat. But surely you can understand why some fans feel that country music has lost some of its edge, some of its authenticity. There are artists today who barely sound country at all. It was the worst possible thing she could have said. Reba's eyes narrowed to slits and her voice dropped to a dangerously quiet tone. Are you comparing me to those artists? Because if you are, you clearly haven't done your homework. I've been fighting to preserve the heart and soul of country music while some of these morning show hosts were still learning how to read a teleprompter. The insult landed hard. Jenna's face flushed red, her professional facade cracking for the first time. That's completely uncalled for, she snapped. Reba, I'm a professional journalist and I have every right to ask challenging questions. Reba let out a disbelieving scoff. Professional journalist? She repeated, gesturing around the cheerful, brightly lit set filled with pastel furniture and coffee mugs. This isn't Meet the Press, sweetheart. This is a morning entertainment show. I came here to entertain your viewers and talk about my tour. Instead, you're trying to turn this into some kind of gotcha moment for your highlight reel. The other co-host, visibly uncomfortable, fidgeted in her chair before blurting out, maybe we should take a quick commercial break and regroup? But Reba wasn't finished. Decades of dealing with media spin and staged interviews had taught her exactly when someone was trying to use her for their own headlines. And she wasn't about to play along. No, she said firmly. Let's keep going. Since we're having such a meaningful conversation about authenticity, let's talk about the authenticity of ambushing a guest with questions that weren't discussed beforehand. Jenna's composure was gone now, replaced by a defensive edge. I don't have to clear my questions with your publicity team, she shot back. This is journalism and journalists ask hard questions. Reba laughed again, but there was no humor in it, only disbelief. Hard questions? Honey, you want to ask hard questions? Let's talk about how morning television has dumbed down American culture. Let's talk about how shows like this prioritize manufactured drama over real content. Let's talk about how you're more interested in creating viral moments than having genuine conversations with your guests. The studio was chaos. Producers waved frantically behind the cameras, stage managers whispered urgently into headsets, and the crew didn't dare stop rolling, not when the most talked about live moment of the year was unfolding before their eyes. Jenna, realizing she was completely outmatched, tried a new tactic. Look, Reba, I clearly touched a nerve and that wasn't my intention. Can we start over? Reba shook her head slowly, her expression filled with disgust. Start over? You don't get to attack someone's integrity and then ask for a do-over when they defend themselves. That's not how the real world works, even if it might be how things work in your little television bubble. The co-host who'd been trying to mediate finally found his voice again. Reba, we really do respect your career and everything you've accomplished. Maybe we can focus on the positive aspects of your current projects. Reba turned her gaze toward him, her patience clearly gone. Respect my career? She repeated. Your co-host just spent the last 10 minutes implying that I'm a sellout. And now you're talking about respect? If this is how you treat guests you claim to respect, I'd hate to see how you treat the ones you don't. Jenna, her face still red with a mix of embarrassment and anger, made one final attempt to reclaim authority. Reba, I'm the host of this show, and I have a responsibility to ask the questions our viewers want answered. That was it, the final straw. Reba's expression turned icy, and when she spoke, her voice was calm but devastatingly precise. Your viewers want answered? She said softly. Let me tell you something about viewers, little girl. I've been connecting with audiences longer than you've been alive. I know what people want, and it's not watching a self-proclaimed journalist with delusions of grandeur try to tear down someone who's actually accomplished something in this world. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the background hum of the control room seemed to fade. Jenna looked stunned, her co-hosts mortified, and Reba, poised, furious, and unshaken, looked like a woman who had finally reached her limit. "You know what?" she said at last, her voice steady but final. "I'm done." Reba stood tall, her voice cold and steady as she faced the stunned hosts. "I came here as a professional courtesy to promote my tour, your show." Her tone dripped with ice, every word deliberate. "Let me tell you something about shows, honey. A real show is what I put on for 50,000 people in an arena. A real show is about connecting with an audience through genuine emotion and honest storytelling." She swept her gaze across the studio with disdain. This is just television." Jenna, clearly insulted, scrambled to her feet. "You're being incredibly disrespectful right now. We invited you here to give you a platform to promote your work." "A platform?" Reba laughed sharply. "Sweetheart, I don't need your platform. I've sold more albums than most artists ever dream of. I've had my own television show, my own production company, and I've built an empire on talent and hard work, not on reading other people's words off a teleprompter." The male co-host raised his hands, trying to calm the storm. "Ladies, please, we're live on television. Can we take this down a notch?" Reba turned to him, her eyes blazing. "We're live? Then let me give your viewers something worth watching. Let me give them a lesson in what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness and professionalism for a pushover." Jenna stepped closer, her face flushed. "You think you can come on my show and talk to me like I'm some intern? I've been doing television for years." Reba arched an eyebrow in mock surprise. "Oh, years? Then you must be an expert. Tell me, in all those years, did anyone ever teach you the courtesy of treating your guests with respect? Or were you too busy learning how to stir up drama for ratings?" The female co-host tried to intervene. "Reba, Jenna, please. We're all professionals here." Reba's head snapped toward her. "A professional doesn't ambush a guest with loaded questions. A professional doesn't create controversy where none exists. And a professional doesn't sit back while their co-host attacks someone, then call for peace once the damage is done." Jenna's face turned crimson. "You're acting like a diva, Reba. Like you're too good to answer tough questions." The word diva seemed to ignite something deep within Reba. She straightened, her voice lowering to a calm, razor-edged whisper. "Diva. That's what you call a woman who refuses to be disrespected. That's what you call someone who won't let you steamroll her for the sake of your agenda." She took a slow step forward and Jenna instinctively stepped back. "A diva shows up prepared. She treats people with respect until they prove they don't deserve it. She isn't afraid to call out unprofessional behavior when she sees it. So if that makes me a diva, I'll wear that label with pride." Jenna's voice faltered. "I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Reba's fury returned in full force. "Your job is to entertain and inform, not to attack your guest for cheap headlines. Your job is to add value, not tear down people who've actually accomplished something. If this is how you do your job, maybe you need a new one." The male co-host made one final attempt to de-escalate. "Reba, everyone's emotions are running high. Maybe we should all take a breath." But Reba was past calming down. "You're damn right emotions are running high," she shot back. "When someone questions my integrity and my commitment to my craft, you better believe emotions will run high. I've spent 40 years in this business without compromising who I am for anyone." Jenna tried again, desperate to regain control. "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're too set in your ways to see how the industry's changed." The studio went silent. Reba's face froze, her tone turning deadly calm. "Too set in my ways?" she repeated slowly. "I'm set in the way of treating people with respect. I'm set in the way of honoring my commitments, of putting my heart and soul into every song I sing. If those values are outdated to you, then we have nothing more to talk about." As she began to walk off set, panic rippled through the production crew. This was live television. There would be no editing, no cover-up. Millions were watching. "Where are you going?" Jenna called out, her voice trembling. "We're not finished here." Reba stopped and turned back, her glare cutting through the tension. "Oh, we're finished. We were finished the moment you turned a friendly conversation into an interrogation. We were finished when you chose drama over decency." "Reba, please," the female co-host pleaded. "We can fix this. Fix this." Reba shook her head slowly, her expression a mix of pity and disappointment. Some things can't be fixed, especially when the problem is arrogance disguised as journalism. With that, she turned and walked off set, leaving stunned silence in her wake as the live audience erupted in disbelief. Reba's voice was calm but final as she looked back at the stunned hosts. Honey, some things can't be fixed. Some bridges, once you burn them, stay burned. And some people, once they show you who they really are, you believe them. Jenna stood frozen, panic flashing across her face as she watched one of country music's biggest legends prepare to walk out of her show. Then, with slow and deliberate precision, Reba reached up, unclipped her microphone, and let it fall to the studio floor. The loud thud echoed through the tense silence, snapping everyone back to reality. "Reba, wait," the male co-host called. Out, but she was already moving toward the edge of the set, graceful, composed, and resolute. Her exit wasn't hurried or emotional, it was powerful and final. Every step carried the weight of conviction. Jenna's mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the chaos in a place where everything was supposed to be scripted and controlled. Morning shows were meant to be lighthearted and predictable, not the scene of a legendary walkout that would soon dominate every corner of the internet. "Ladies and gentlemen," the female co-host stammered nervously, "we're going to take a quick commercial break." But the damage was done. Reba had reached the edge of the set and paused, glancing back at the wreckage behind her. 3 shaken hosts, scrambling producers, and a studio that had just witnessed its own undoing. Her voice, strong and unwavering, even without a microphone, carried clearly across the room. "You know what's really sad about all this? I used to respect this show. I thought it stood for something good in television. But I guess I was wrong about a lot of things." "Reba, you're embarrassing yourself," Jenna finally managed, her tone brittle and desperate. "This is going to be all over the news." Reba actually laughed, a real unbothered laugh that filled the studio. "Embarrassing myself? Honey, the only thing embarrassing here is watching grown adults act like children on national television. And as for it being all over the news, good. At least it'll be honest coverage for once." "Please just come back and sit down," the male co-host pleaded. "We can talk this through like adults." Reba shook her head. "I tried to have an adult conversation. I tried to be professional, to talk about my music and my tour. But apparently adult conversation doesn't sell commercial time anymore." She turned and looked straight into the camera, her gaze steady and unflinching. "To anyone out there who supports me, my fans, the people who've come to my shows, who've followed me for years, I want you to know I'll never compromise my values or my integrity for anyone. Not for record labels, not for TV networks, and certainly not for talk show hosts who think tearing people down counts as journalism." The studio was silent except for the faint hum of the lights. Even Jenna knew by now that anything she said would only make things worse. Reba continued, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "I've been in this business for 4 decades, and I've learned that success isn't about luck. It's about character. It's about how you treat people, both on and off camera. It's about standing up for what's right even when it's uncomfortable." She paused, scanning the faces of everyone in the room. "I came here to talk about music and the joy it brings people. Instead, I was reminded why I prefer the honesty of the concert stage over the manufactured drama of television studios." "Please, Reba, don't go," the female co-host begged. "We can make this right." Reba's expression softened, but her decision was final. "Sweetheart, some things can't be made right with apologies and do-overs. Some things require accountability and change, and I don't see either of those here today." With that, she turned and began walking toward the studio doors, her head held high. Everyone watched in stunned silence, realizing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years, a masterclass in dignity and self-respect. "This has been real educational," Reba called over her shoulder as she reached the exit. "I hope your viewers got something valuable out of it, because they certainly deserve better than what they saw here today." And with that, she was gone. The cameras lingered on the empty doorway for a few seconds before cutting abruptly to commercial. The silence that followed was suffocating. The three hosts sat like statues, the shock etched across their faces. Producers rushed in, whispering urgently about damage control and public statements. Jenna slumped in her chair, the weight of what had just happened settling over her. She had gone head-to-head with Reba McEntire and lost spectacularly, live, in front of millions. "What just happened?" the male co-host muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. What had happened was simple. Reba McEntire had reminded everyone that integrity isn't negotiable, that respect is earned, and that true professionalism sometimes means walking away. In a world of scripted smiles and contrived drama, she had shown that authenticity could still triumph, and that no network, no host, and no controversy could shake the foundation of a woman who stood firmly in her truth.